Let me bring in the panel now. David French, senior writer for the National Review. Michael Eric Dyson, Georgetown professor of sociology. Also, the author of What Truth Sounds Like. Robert F. Kennedy, James Baldwin, and our unfinished conversation about race in America. Always good to have both of you. David, let me start with you here, because there's a recent piece that you wrote for the National Review, and you criticized progressives for deploying what you call, your words here, religious ignorance and bigotry to stop Amy Coney Barrett, one of the leading contenders on that short list that Kelly O'Donnell was just talking about. You write, Amy Coney Barrett is at the peak of her profession. She shares faith practices with millions of co-religionists. Her faith experience is their faith experience, and if progressives seek to block her from the nation's highest court because of it, they'll betray our nation's founding ideals. David, fair game for a judge's religion to be considered at all through this process?
Not fair game. I mean, the Constitution prohibits a religious test for public office. And I think what happened in Amy Coney Barrett's initial nomination for the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, when Dianne Feinstein said of her, the dogma lives loudly within you, that crossed a very bright line for conservatives, but also, I would note, for quite a few progressives. I note that there were progressives who attacked her religion in that piece, but there were also progressives who understood what was happening was constitutionally problematic and rallied to her support. For example, Noah Feldman, extremely influential law school professor at Harvard, rallied to her side. It's completely fair to examine her judicial philosophy, to probe her judicial philosophy, to ask questions about her religious beliefs and her religious faith. That is out of bounds. And if the Democrats do that, if she is the nominee and the Democrats do that, they will only serve to rally Trump's religious conservative base even more strongly in support of that nominee.
Dr. Dyson, it sounds like David French is making a bit of a progressive argument in that this idea that a person's faith really should not be considered a great deal when you're talking about their judicial philosophy.
Sure. Well, I've been an ordained Baptist minister for nearly 40 years, got a PhD in religion from Princeton, so I certainly empathize with those who feel that their religion is under assault and that it is being used as a litmus test for their legitimacy or validity or their potential candidacy for the highest court in the land. So obviously that's clear. I think what's disturbing here is the consequences politically for whatever religious belief she might entertain. For instance, if she believes that there's a certain kind of deference that ought to be paid politically to a religious belief, that would then impinge on a political arena. The policy that would be shaped, the legal jurisdictions that would be exercised, and the judgments that will be rendered then would have a direct impact on that. But by and large, I certainly empathize with those who say that the Second Amendment protects us by making no religion king. All others are able to participate. What I'm more concerned about, of course, is the legal consequences of her own vision and what that might mean for the rest of the country, especially when it comes to a woman's right to choose and other serious issues that will come before that court.
Dr. Dyson, has the left taken the Supreme Court for granted? And by that I mean, it would seem as if over the last two presidential cycles especially, Republicans have done a much better job of galvanizing their base by stressing the importance of the president's ability to appoint a justice or two. Does the left take that as seriously as the right does?
No, I think you're absolutely right. We have to acknowledge that we've been outmaneuvered here because we have been almost monomaniacal on the top spot on the ballot, so to speak. So that there were my fellow leftists who were contending that there was no essential difference between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. That was not only grievously ill-informed, what it did was undermine the capacity of the voter to come together to say it's not just about who's at the top of the ballot, it's about that president who will appoint people to the Supreme Court who will outlive him in terms of his political influence, who will render judgments that will leave a permanent imprint upon the social conscience and consciousness of American society. So yes, in that sense, because we have been so narrowly focused, we haven't understood the necessity to galvanize politically around around this issue of Supreme Court appointments, around people who will become prosecutors, because they also affect the lives of ordinary people. For instance, whether or not a police person will be charged with a particular crime, like, say, for instance, shooting an unarmed African-American citizen. So, yes, we have been outmaneuvered on our flanks, and we need to come together to understand that when we make decisions and cast ballots, dimple those chads or pull those levers, it is more than for the President of the United States of America. It's about a way, a truth, an approach, and I think in this sense we've been outmaneuvered.
David, one of the president's considerations here, according to the Washington Post, one of these 4 federal appeals court judges who already met with President Trump, already drawn some criticism from conservatives. The Post reporting, the political moment for Trump was fragile as a president devoted to his base weighed what a Kavanaugh selection could mean for him, unfolding amid a flurry of op-eds and phone calls praising the 53-year-old judge, as well as a clamor from those who see him as out of step on health care and abortion, or too tied to George W. Bush's White House. Is Kavanaugh already in trouble?
Well, I can tell you for a fact that there are social conservatives in D.C. and elsewhere who are nervous about him. They are not nervous about the other 3 of the final 4 that have been mentioned, particularly Amy Coney Barrett and Raymond Kethledge, but they are nervous about Brett Kavanaugh. There is an undercurrent of concern about him, particularly related to 2 decisions, one Priest for Life decision, another decision involving Obamacare that raised worries. And that's not to say that Brett Kavanaugh isn't an outstanding judge, an outstanding legal mind, and he may go onto the court and be the kind of home run pick that Neil Gorsuch has been for conservatives. But I will say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, there are concerns that have been raised, that are being raised publicly and privately about him, that have not been raised about the others.
A la David Souter and George H.W. Bush.
Right. Well, don't even mention the name David Souter. I mean, that's a name from nightmares. No one's saying that Brett Kavanaugh would be a David Souter. Nobody's saying that. And I think everyone knows that Brett Kavanaugh would be a more conservative justice than Anthony Kennedy. But the question is here, when you have an opportunity to make a court-shaping pick, the pick that could mean that it's a much more solid originalist majority than has existed, certainly in my lifetime, on the Supreme Court of the United States, do you pick someone when there is even that shadow of a doubt about their originalist commitment, when there is not that doubt that exists with multiple other selections on that list? And that is the key question. And again, it could be unfair to Judge Kavanaugh, but these are the concerns that are being raised.
David French, thank you. Dr. Dyson, always good to have you as well, sir. Thank you.
That originalist scares me, because originally I wasn't counted as a person within the confines of that document. So the Supreme Court has a lot more soul-searching to do, and originalist philosophy is hardly the most worrisome aspect of those decisions.
David French, Dr. Dyson usually gets the last word, so we'll have to pick it up next time. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.